All right. Hello, all. So today we're going to be looking at B4.2, which is ecological niches. It's on page 321 to 334 of the Oxford textbook. We're focused on form and function for ecological niches. And we were trying to answer the question, what are the advantages of specialized modes of nutrition to living organisms? And then how are the adaptations of a species related to its niche in an ecosystem? So first we need to understand what a niche is. And so this is the role a species plays in the ecosystem, both its biotic and abiotic factors. So where does it live based on zones of tolerance for abiotic factors? How is food obtained? How do they compete or specialize to get resources? How are they living in that area? And how is this species used by other species? So a fundamental niche is where an organism could live based on its ecological needs. A realized niche, though, is where an organism actually lives based on competition in that ecosystem. And then sometimes competitive exclusion can happen, and that's where fundamental niches overlap. And so with two species, and so one species outcompetes the other in all areas of the fundamental niche, which then means the other species can no longer live in any part of its fundamental niche and will be excluded from that ecosystem. And that might lead to extinction or pushing that species out of that ecosystem entirely. So there's a lot of different ways that organisms get food. There are obligate anaerobes, which require oxygen. Those are like humans. Obligate anaerobes, which can't tolerate oxygen at all. They only deal with anoxic conditions. So that would be like the the bacteria tetanus. Facultative anaerobes, which use oxygen if it's available, but they're also okay if there's no oxygen. So that would be like yeast. And then photosynthesis, which is done by all the plants, so ferns and mosses, angiosperms, which are flowering plants, conifers, which are pine trees, and then algae. And then holozoic nutrition. So these are heterotrophs. Heterotrophs eat things. So when they're eating things, they take food into the gut, they digest it and break it down into small molecules, they absorb it. So they're transporting molecules across a membrane. They assimilate it. So they use the digested food to make biomolecules. And then they egest, meaning they poop out unused materials. And so for holozoic nutrition strategies, you could also have mixotrophs. That would be like a Venus flytrap. So they're both hetero and autotrophic. Autotrophs are photosynthesizers. Mixotrophs examples could also be protists, which are unicellular eukaryotes. And then saprotrophs are also holozoic. So they're secreting enzymes externally to their bodies, and then they digest things externally. So this would be like mushrooms digesting dead organic material nearby. And then they absorb it through their mycelial network, which is kind of like the mushroom equivalent of roots, and absorb the digested materials into their mushroom bodies. In archaea, they are similar to prokaryotes for nutrition in that they have they are similar to prokaryotes in that they have no nucleus, but otherwise are very similar to eukaryotic cells. And they can be phototrophic, so can prokaryotes, chemotrophic and heterotrophic. So they're eating things, or they're making food products from sunlight, or they're making food products from, and when I say food products, I mean energy sources. They're making food products from chemosynthesis, which is using chemicals instead of light to produce organic materials for that plant, or sorry, for that organism. In the case of phototrophic, it means they're using sunlight to make glucose, which is an organic material for that organism. Teeth can be used to determine nutrition. So if we have flat teeth like molars, Those are typically for grinding. So if you've ever seen the inside of a horse's mouth, they pretty much only have molars from here all the way back. And then they have incisors at the very front for snipping. We have incisors too. And then canines, my canines are really flat, so they're not really good examples, but canines being for ripping action, and we see those on dogs. Herbivorous insects, and you can see this picture up here at the top right, have homologous mouthparts for eating plants. And so they have jaw-like mouthparts for biting and chewing leaves. You can see that one on the left. They have tubes for piercing leaves. That one's in the center. And then you could also have sucking mouthparts for accessing plant flowers, for example. And then plants have a variety of adaptations to prevent themselves from being eaten. So that might be toxic chemicals, that might be spines, and then organisms adapt also to deal with those toxins produced by plants. So for example, sloths can't get very much energy from the leaves that they eat. And the leaves that they eat are quite difficult for them to digest because they do have a lot of alkaloids in them and they're quite toxic for most other species, which is why they're so slow, because they don't have enough energy from the product that they eat to be able to waste energy. That being said, they have an unlimited supply of those leaves. And in the case of plants competing with other plants, some plants may grow quickly or up other plants to access sunlight, and that's a competitive strategy for them to access nutrition. So there's also predator-prey adaptations. So there can be physical adaptations, like you can see here with this vampire bat. They have very sharp incisors to allow them to bite and then be able to suck blood. Buff-tipped moths, those have wing colors that look like twigs, so they look like pieces of wood when they're resting, and so that they can take a break without being eaten very easily. There might be chemical adaptations to prevent organisms from being eaten or successfully eating. So black mamba snakes have neurotoxin venom that is going to paralyze its prey and allow it to get dinner better. And then cinnabar moth caterpillars, that's this black and red moth on the right here. They feed on ragwort, which makes them toxic to predators, and so their colors show a warning. So they can relax because predators know if I eat this thing, it's going to make me sick. And then also predator-prey adaptations can be behavioral. So in the case of grizzly bears, they have different ambush strategies for catching salmon in a river. But snappers, which you can see here on the right, are going to swim together in a school of fish with random erratic changes in direction so that they can avoid being eaten very easily. So to summarize, organisms have a lot of different strategies for getting nutrition. They can be aerobic, anaerobic, photosynthetic, saprotrophic, or holozoic. And actually, saprotrophs would I guess they're not technically eating anything. There's no chewing, but they are digesting externally and then sucking it in. So technically saprotrophs should fall under a holozoic category. Organisms have adaptations to acquire food, to protect themselves, and to compete for resources. And then organisms all survive in separate realized niches, though some areas of their fundamental niches may overlap. If their fundamental niches fully overlap, they could be competitively excluded. So in this case here, you can see in number 1, these yellow birds, this is their fundamental niche. But as these red birds come in, they are competitively excluding the yellow birds from the center niche here. And so they're getting pushed into different areas. The red birds are not fully competitively excluding them because the yellow bird's niche was this whole tree, and therefore they're able to live in certain niches. So this is the step 3 is more like the realized niche of these yellow birds when the red birds are present is the higher area and the lower area, and the red birds will be in the middle. All right, so that's it for this video. Thank you for watching.